this video, we're going to understand piping and output redirection in Bash. Now that you understand standard in, standard out, and standard error, understanding these topics in Bash will be really easy. Because now it all comes down to what you want to do with those three data stream devices. So let's start with piping. Now, piping in Bash is done using this. So using this character, which is called a pipe, should be on your keyboard where you have your backslash. So you can just hit Shift and then backslash to get this character. Now what this character means is that Bash is going to take the standard out of your first process, so process 1, and it's going to attach that standard out to the standard in of process 2. And that's it. That's all that pipe does. And it's really useful, and you will probably make use of this a lot because now you can combine multiple processes together and have the best of all the worlds. So let's just see one quick example. Now when I say echo some string, now what this means, echo will take this string and write it to its standard out. So I'm going to get that string right here. So let's now pipe it. So we can now pipe it to any other process that we have. Let's pipe it to our Node application. So node playground.js. Now let's see what we're doing with the standard in. So here I'm going to comment the spawning a process code. So all of this is now commented, and I'm just going to comment out this section: standard in, standard out, and standard error. And let's not write anything for now, and let's just now read from our standard in and then write to standard out. So we're going to read something and then say got this data from standard in, and then we're just going to log it. So pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So right here in my terminal, I'm just going to run this. Now what's going to happen is that Bash is going to take this, because this is the standard out of this echo process, and it's going to give this output to the standard in of my Node application. So my Node application here says got this data from standard in some string, and it could keep on doing it. So here I can just pipe it again to another process. So again, I'm going to take the result, I'm going to take the standard out of this process and now give it to another process. Let's now make this string uppercase. So I'm going to make use of the translate command, and using the translate command, again, we can just go through our string and then do some modifications, do some replacing. So if I say this, now this is a symbol that means all lowercases. So I'm saying to convert all lowercase characters to, I can say maybe to F or anything else that I want, but let's convert them to uppercase. So we can make use of this again from uppercase A to uppercase C. So this basically just means to uppercase, okay? So let's now run it. And now we can see that my output now is uppercase. But I made use of another application, this TR application, to do just that. So this is really handy, and you can get creative with this, and you can do a whole lot of things with this. And now we can combine many different processes. Now keep in mind that we are not grabbing the standard error, okay? So if in my Node code, if I just write something, instead of writing to standard out, after, you know what, let's not read from standard in, and let's just write something to standard out and also something to standard error. Let me also put a new line character at the end. There we go. So let's go ahead and run it. Again, we're just writing once to standard out and then once to standard error. If I just run this node playground, again, you can imagine what's going to happen. So node playground.js, we're going to get these two strings. But now if I pipe this to, let's say, the tr command again to make it uppercase, so I'm just going to say lower cases and convert them to uppercase. Now if I run it, now as you can see here, I'm only converting my standard out to uppercase. I'm not doing anything with my standard error. So standard error is just going to be written here into my terminal, and this application, this TR application, is not going to do anything with this output, only the standard out. So again, this pipe means to, instead of writing the standard out to the terminal right now, give it to the next process, and you can keep chaining this. All right, so that's it about piping in Bash. Again, now that you understand these data streams, it's a pretty straightforward topic. Now let's talk about output redirection, another pretty straightforward topic now that you understand these devices. So output redirection is kind of like piping, but now we're saying to grab the output, whatever we want, and save it to a file. Or for standard in, just grab the data from a file and then give it to the standard in. So here my node playground.js again. If I say this, again, remember that these devices, 0 is for standard in, 1 is for standard out, and 2 is for standard error. So we can do this. We can say that grab the output, grab the standard out of this process, and this now means to save it to a file. So I'm just going to say text.txt. If I run it now, you can see here that I'm not getting the log for standard out. I'm only getting the log for standard error. And the reason is, well, we are redirecting our output. We're redirecting the standard out to this file. And now if I go into my code editor, right here you can see that I have this file. Now we can also redirect the error. So we can say to, and here I'm going to save it to maybe er.txt. And now if I run it, I'm not going to see any output in my terminal. And if I go right here, you can see that I got the standard error in this error.txt file and my standard out in this text.txt file. So this is what output redirection is. Now also, if you don't specify anything, it's going to be by default your standard out, because it's a pretty common thing, and it also doesn't matter if you don't put a space. So this is just like before. And if I take a look here, you can see that they're just like before, okay? So if you don't specify anything here, it's going to be by default number 1, meaning standard out. Now we can also do it the other way around. So I can say node playground.js and do this. Say to read the data from one file, for example, text.txt, and the contents of this file, make the contents of this file to become available on the standard in of this application. So if I just put something here, so I'm just going to say this is some text and more, and that's it. Now let's go ahead and run it. And actually, let's check what we're doing with the standard in. Well, we're not doing anything, so I'm just going to comment these 2 lines, and I'm just going to read from standard in again. And now if I go ahead and now run this, you can see that it says got this data from standard in, and this is some text and more and more. So this is the content of this file, of this text.txt, because I said to make this available to the standard in of this process. And again, if you don't specify anything here, it's going to be by default 0. Well, actually, you can't specify anything else. If you say 1 or 2, it's going to give you an error. So it doesn't make a ton amount of sense. All right, so by default, this means to just give this data to the standard in. Now, these are greater or less than signs, but if you want to think about them like that, it's going to be really confusing. Instead, think of them like an arrow. So here, it means to just grab this output and redirect it to this. Okay, so this is an arrow that is pointing from this to this. Or here, this is another arrow that is pointing from this to this. Okay, so if you think of them like arrows, it's going to make much more sense. All right, now we can also, again, just don't pay attention to some data, just put it into trash. You can do that. So right here in my code, in my node, if I just log these, so I'm going to write once to standard out and once to standard error. And now what I can do is that I can say that I don't want my standard out or my standard error. And the way that we can do it, and this is another common pattern that you're going to see a lot in Bash, I can grab my to and say to save it to dev null. And now if I run it, I'm not going to get the errors that this application is going to produce. Now dev null, it's a special file in Unix. And it's just like something that's going to eat your data, and it's not really going to do anything else. So it's just like trash. So if you write something to this thing, that's it. That data is gone. All right. So think of it just like a trash that you put output into it, and that output is gone for good. Now, if you take a look at the content of this file, it's not that we are actually writing it. This file, its size is going to be the same thing. Again, it's just this symbol, this file that indicates trash, and it's a special file. All right, that's all that I'm going to talk about this dev null, and you're going to see this again in Bash a lot, because sometimes you want to run some commands and you don't want to see the errors. So commands might produce both good outputs and some errors, and you just want to remove all the errors so that you have something clean to look at. In that case, you can do something like this. Now also these output redirections, for example, this one, they will overwrite your file. Okay, so they will, if you have some content in text.txt or error.txt, they will just overwrite it. If you want to append, you have to use two of these signs. So now this means to append. So if I run this multiple times, let's just do it with text.txt. If I run it like this, now I have some data in text.txt, as you can see right here. And if I run it again, I have some more data. Now, if you're wondering why in the world do we want to care about appending, well, it's actually pretty useful. You're going to use it a lot. One useful use case that I can think of right now is that if you have a coworker that you want to bother, you can just do something like this. You can say echo, so you can quickly go to their terminal and run this and then close the tab and you're done. So you can say sleep to, and then you can append this to their bash.rc file or zshrc file, whatever is their default bash file. So I'm going to do it pretty quick, and you're just going to run this, and then you're going to clear the terminal and then close your terminal and you're done. Now your coworker, every time they want to open up a new shell, they're going to have to wait for 2 seconds until they get their shell. And it's really, really annoying, and it's going to drive them nuts. And if they don't know Unix, good luck with them finding out what's going on. I'm just kidding, of course, don't do this. Alright, so that's it about output redirection and piping in Bash. And again, the hard part is to understand standard in, standard out, and standard error. If you understand those things, these things in Bash are going to be pretty straightforward to understand. And I'm sure that now you feel much more comfortable with using these symbols in your Bash. So piping, and this, and this, and appending. Alright, and also 0 is for standard in, 1 is for standard out, and 2 is for standard error. Alright, so in the next video, we're going to practice our knowledge with these data streams and build a command line utility. So I will see you in the next one.